I'm Lori Harrison-Smith. I am a community strategist at Motorola Solutions for our internal community. I've used many different vendor platforms, so I'm looking forward to this discussion. I know that a lot of the features in platforms can be similar, but there's a lot of different ones as well, and a lot of different ways that we can use these tools to engage audiences. So let's start on my top here. I got David first. You want to introduce yourself, where you work, and maybe what keeps you up at night when it comes to community engagement?
Great. Thank you very much, Laurie. So my name is David Fletcher. I work for Beezy. I've been with Beezy for 5 years now, and I've worked in the intranet space since 2008. So I've been, SharePoint intranet space since 2008. So I've been working in this industry for a while and worked for a competitor before joining Beezy. My role officially title is sales director, but I've done pretty much everything for Beezy and in this industry, from project management, customer success, to the whole lot. So my job day to day now is listening to customers and trying to explain why our product helps. What keeps me up at night? Lack of understanding keeps me up at night. So I think one of the challenges I face is that I speak to all different types of community managers. I speak to people who are very experienced, people relatively new, and it's a world that is bombarded with messaging. So, we'd have had this conversation 5 years ago, and we would have talked about bots, right? It would have been the thing that everyone wanted. And 2 years before that, it was ESNs. Everyone wanted an ESN. And today, of course, mainly thanks to Microsoft, it's about the employee experience, but a lot of people don't necessarily know what that means. So the thing that keeps me up at night is, how do I not only define us as a product, but how do I also have a conversation with all these people and try and reduce the noise from them, try and make their life easier so they can understand, well, what even is engagement? What even is employee experience? What are all these terms, and how do I make them relevant to me as an organization? Because completely honestly, we're not for everyone as a product, but we're a very opinionated product. So we do things the way we think they should be done, and that works for some and not for others. So yeah, what keeps me up at night is, how the hell do I make our product simple?
I think it's a good thing to consider. I think a lot of customers will appreciate that. Ted, what about you? Tell us about you and your up at night in the middle of the night thoughts.
I'm Ted Hoptin. I'm based in Chicago, and I work for LumApps. And I've been in this space, as David said, for quite a long time, also since about 2008. I ran internal online communities for a couple of large corporations for 10 years, and been in various operations with different vendors in the space as well. So I've had a chance to get to know different platforms in addition to LumApps. I would say what keeps me up at night in terms of this field is when I see a customer, one of our customers, not really understanding they need to have somebody who's responsible for engagement. If it's a technical lead who's really running the project, and there isn't somebody who's really focused on and thinking about engagement, that worries me, because it's so much more than just the technology. You've got to really be thinking about the people and the change management and how you're going to make the organization be successful with the technology. So obviously you need a technology lead to make sure everything's done correctly and set up, but you've also got to have that engagement lead.
Yeah, good point. What about you, Brad? Tell us about your job and your engagement challenges.
Sure. Thanks, Lori. So my name's Brad Rooke, and I am the Senior Solutions Consultant with Customer Experience here at Igloo Software. So I've been with Igloo for 2 years actually this month, which is pretty cool. Former customer in the space of digital communities, digital workplaces. I used Igloo before in a former life, but I'm also an experienced consultant with a slant towards security software and evolution along those lines, so looking at incident reporting, dispatching, things like that. My role with Igloo is to help our customers love their igloos, is basically what it is. And that can entail anything from interpreting their data to holding engagement sessions with them, things like that. So I think what really keeps me up at night is, in my role, I have a very holistic view of our customer base. And we have many different industries, many different verticals, and many different interpretations of what a digital workplace is, a digital destination is, and what customers use it for. So what keeps me up at night with terms of engagement is really understanding what that is for each of our customers, and something that looking at something and determining, well, maybe that's not a successful number in my book, but it's working for this customer. So it's really interpreting each customer's definition of engagement and working with them to make that real and to push them forward with using the digital workplace. That's really what I start looking at.
Well, that's a great segue because that was my next question. I mean, it's kind of a good thing to start with to have a framework for the conversation, right? What are some general ways that you define engagement or your customers define engagement that, kind of help you to create the success at the end of the road?
Sorry, was that for me?
Yeah, sorry.
No
Sorry.
worries. No worries. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, it does vary customer to customer, and it really depends on the orientation of the digital workplace. What is it for? A lot of customers are very socially minded. They're using it as kind of a social collaboration tool. A lot of customers are very knowledge oriented, and they're using it simply to warehouse knowledge. A lot of customers have it as the digital front door to their workplace. So that's the first place they expect employees to log in, and it might be the last place an employee leaves at night. So how engagement is defined, again, really varies from customer to customer, but it's got to be more than simple logins. And that's where we really have to dive into the data and metrics and determine, okay, first off, what's the customer's use case? And secondly, is that use case being met? So if I've got a knowledge-based digital workplace, are my customers engaging? Are my members engaging with the knowledge that's in that digital workplace? If they're not, if I don't see that people are going to the channels where documentation is housed, if I don't see that they're participating in that, then the digital workplace isn't meeting its mandate as far as the organization's concerned. Similarly, if I've got a customer who's very socially minded and they have a lot of different social channels and maybe team or office-based social channels, but those social channels aren't creating activity, then I start to get concerned about that. If I'm not seeing posts, if I'm not seeing engagement with those posts, then those are things that I really start to look at as areas of concern. So again, it's really determined by the customer and their use case. And really that's where my role comes in. It's really interpreting how the customer sees engagement, what would be their ideal standpoint on engagement, and then how to best evangelize for that and help the customer work towards that.
Sure. Ted, I imagine you and David both would have a similar answer, but what about at LumApps as far as setting engagement goals for customers? How do you work with them to define that maybe in the beginning of the process?
Well, I think the first thing to think about is go back to the definition question. How do we define engagement? Mm-hmm. And I guess the way I think about it is, why do we care? Why are we interested in engagement? And if you really ask that question and look at what's underneath it instead of just assuming, oh, engagement's good. It is good, by the way. But the reason for it is we're looking for value. We want to be able to show value with what we're doing. Otherwise, why are we doing it? And we know there's research about employees who are engaged are more productive and the companies do better. So we understand there's value with engagement. But I think it's important to just get back to the idea and recognize that with an online community or a platform like LumApps, what we're aiming for is basically to add value to the organization. So I talk about value added, and we're trying to gain value for the people who are using it. And I think it's often dismissed as sort of obvious when people say, oh, well, there's so many lurkers, they're not participating. They're actually gaining value if they're going into the system. They wouldn't keep going back in if they weren't getting value out of it. Otherwise, they would just go away. So even low-level metrics that are just showing people are consuming content, that's really important. If they're not, what's the point? You want to have just a bunch of people creating content and say, yay, we've got lots of participation. But if nobody's reading it, it's not working. So you really need both pieces, the value add and the value gain. And I think with our customers, very much to Brad's point, it was well taken. You've got to look at what the customer's objectives are and helping them understand what their use cases are, what their goals are, what are they trying to get out of having the system? Again, what's the value they're trying for? And so we're looking at those factors and taking them into account in how we guide them. And the implementation process is really the place where you launch the customer towards success by making sure they are educated about how to think through these things, and then also how to measure them. So again, we're trying to help them be successful, and we need to give them tools to measure their success as well.
Sure. Sure. Okay, David, how about from the Beezy perspective? Do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, the guys have made some really good points. I think there's a very direct correlation with some of our most successful customers when it comes to employee engagement and the work they've done before that we've even been engaged. So what I mean is that a lot of really successful organizations that we deal with, and we're talking some really big ones here, 250, 200,000 employees, even some of the smaller ones, we had one go live last week that's only 1,000 employees. Before they even looked at the vendors, they'd kind of gone in and done the whole employee engagement surveys. They'd spoken to the users and really found out what was lacking. And I did a webinar, I think last week or the week before, and I was on with another guy from another organization, and he said the most common thing he hears from internal comms when they launch a new digital workplace that's been carefully thought through is, oh, the news is so much better. It's the same news. It's the same people writing it. It's just that now they're finding the things that are relevant. And I think these very simple idioms that we hear all the time about, well, making sure it's delivered to the right people, making sure that it's, what we're doing is for the users. Because as Ted rightly said, why do we do this? Why does Beezy exist? Well, we're trying to make a product that allows our users' life to be better, to be easier, to make work just a more simple and pleasurable experience. So I think engagement can have many different forms and facets and metrics and analytics, but if you don't know what's lacking or you don't know what you're trying to achieve, then it's very, very difficult to define that. Now, of course, we have a customer success program that's dedicated to it. I've got in front of me a list of, I think, 30 things we go through where we define what this looks like for the customer, but it's, always different and always a lot more successful if the customer's already thought about it before they choose a product like Beezy.
Great. All great detailed answers. Thank you. Ted, you brought up the analytics, and I know David was mentioning that a bit too. What does Lumax do to help out to measure that engagement? And you can talk about engagement, but if you can't see that it's happening, and I've worked in a number of platforms where you're taking pieces and parts from different tools because Google Analytics, you need support to get certain things. So what does LumApps provide for customers to help them to measure that and be successful in planning for their goals and strategies?
We've got the basic analytics that you would expect to find around the content, how much has been viewed, how much there's participation with it at the site level and at the platform level. But I'd be the first to say, and I have been saying for a long time, that I don't think any vendor does as good a job as they should be doing in terms of providing analytics. And I'm very happy with the roadmap that I see at LumApps around analytics. We're getting ready to launch a data lake that'll give our customers access to their data and